G'day. Welcome to Lunch Money. We are your online and social media home for special situations, workouts, and capital raising professionals. My name is Nick Samios. I am the fund manager and director here at Hermes Capital, and I am your live stream and podcast host. So once again, a very special welcome to you. Thank you for joining episode 46. I'm very excited about today's episode. We talk about all kinds of different special situations, distressed investing, mergers and acquisitions, and today we're going to focus in on startups. We talk about there's a lot of money around, a lot of investment funds are looking for places to put their money, and startups are seeing some of the benefits of that. So we'll get to that with our special guests very shortly. I would like to remind you, as usual, to share, like or subscribe to our humble podcast and live stream. Give us a share and give us a like and set the notification bell too. And that way, whenever we go on, you won't miss an episode. With no further ado, I would like to introduce our first guest. G'day, Gino.
Hi, Nick. How are you?
Not too bad at all. Thank you very much for joining us. Gino is an investor. He's got a background in corporate finance and banking and property. He's a managing director of Marra Capital, but he's also the chairman of the newest A-League club, Macarthur FC, the Macarthur Bulls, who I reckon are going pretty well, given that they're a new club, and they've certainly been very exciting to watch of late when I've tuned into some of those games. You're also a chairman of another company, and you're on the board of directors of other companies. There's Opus and Pennytel. So you are a very, very busy man. What is it that keeps you busy the most this last week?
Oh, look, the last week, I'd actually say Pennytel. We completed that acquisition on the 5th of this month, and it's an interesting one. Just trying to bring some different teams together, and just getting around how different things are happening. It's different when you've got a deal deck and you've signed off on something, and you actually look at it once it's complete and the transaction's done, and how things may be better or worse. But it's been a busy week.
And is that a startup company itself, or it's an established business? So when you say we, do you mean your investment fund?
Yeah, the investment group that acquired it. So we have another phone company called MeSim, and that acquired Pennytel. Pennytel's been around for about 8-9 years. Has roughly about 30,000 customers. It basically rents space from the Telstra network, and it's a good fit to MeSim, whereas MeSim's basically an NBN company. Pennytel's just a mobile company, and sort of bringing the two together.
And you're also, is it Opus? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, Opus. Yep, Opus Industrial.
And that's a waste management company?
Yes, it's a waste management company, technology. Lucky enough to be asked to come on as a seed investor, and then later as chair. That's a really exciting business. That's basically treating organic waste and looking at the processing, basically turning the waste into CO2 and the CO2 into hydrogen.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, the hydrogen
and that
charges a machine, but it's total looping of waste.
And that's a genuine startup.
Yeah, genuine startup. Started off about 3 years ago, and the last probably 2 years is just contracts, getting the technology. The patent has 187,000 pages of documents.
Oh my God.
So, we've been spending a lot of time on that, and we've gone from 4 staff to about 30 staff in 6 months.
Wow, that's fantastic. And of course, on top of all that, you're the chairman of Macarthur FC.
Yes, that's the fun bit of work. So
yeah.
So look at it's what do they say? Those who can't play either coach, and if you're lucky enough, you get to own a team, and it's really exciting, Nick, and I just it's a business. there's a lot of, nearly 40 staff, including players. It's nearly a $20 million turnover business. It's only business to start in the middle of COVID. Also only football or professional sports team to start worldwide in the middle of COVID. It's had its challenges, but it definitely has had its rewards.
But it's amazing, where that, it's just a business. You say, I mean, it could go anywhere. I mean, you finish. Is it in the top two? If you finish top two, next thing you know, once COVID's out of the way, you're playing in Asia.
Yeah, 100%. And look, it's a really interesting competition this year. Central Coast, I think 25 points. Sydney FC in 6th place on 19, and between second and 6th, there's 2 points. So lose 2 games, and you find you're out of the 6th. You can fall to 7th, 8th, 9th. It's a real aggressive competition this year.
Yeah, look, it's fantastic. It's very exciting. I'll have to get out to watch one of your home games. I saw it in the wet the other day, and it seemed like the rain didn't trouble you at all. The surface looked like it was fantastic. So you got a great ground out there as well.
Yeah, it's great. It's probably the best field from a drainage perspective in the league. It's some crazy figure like 400,000 litres an hour.
Wow.
So Campbelltown Council has done a phenomenal job, getting that stadium to where it is. But it's good. Every time it rains, we win. So I'm hoping it rains this weekend.
Okay, good mud runners. All right, listen, we're going to put you in the waiting room, Gino, and we're going to introduce our next guest. Our next guest is Nick Hitchens. G'day, Nick. How are you?
Nick. Very well, and you?
Fantastic. I'm fantastic. Nick is a lawyer with Hitch Advisory. He specialises in structuring M&As, all sorts of advice to startups, dispute resolution, commercial agreements, capital raising, etc. And you're also on the advisory board of the Boathouse Group, I noticed. So that must have been pretty exciting a year or so ago. What is it that keeps you? Yeah, I can imagine. What is it that's been keeping you busy this week? You said that you've got a capital raise getting away today.
I've got an M&A, a childcare M&A getting away today. So that's been quite a substantial one. So that should finish around lunchtime. And we've also been working on a franchise rollout for a new range of health and beauty clinics. So that's been keeping us busy. We've been raising capital for a drone technology software as a service piece. So they'll be going for their second round of raising capital and putting in place an employee share plan. And also probably the other big project this week is assisting some guys with the legals on a new hotel joint venture. So a few different fingers in different pies.
Okay, so they're all different aspects of capital raising and buying and selling businesses and startups and all that sort of thing. That's interesting about the drone business. One of our early episodes of Lunch Money, we had the CEO of Orbital, who is a listed company out of West Australia. I don't know if you know those guys.
I've heard of them, yes.
Yeah, they started out as the Orbital Engine Company, but these days they provide propulsion systems for military drones. So yeah, very interesting. Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. Yeah, and so who are you mainly engaging with? Accounting firms, PE firms? I mean, who is it that you're mainly working for?
Yeah, so we sort of have 3 main sort of core client or referral relationships. Obviously, private business owners are our most significant. They're sort of grown-up mum and dad businesses, if you like. Then we have our accountancy and corporate advisor clients and referral partners, and then we have our pure play startups. So guys that have an idea, they come to us. They need assistance with raising capital. We don't do the introductions, but we do assist them with the legals and the structuring of that capital raising process.
Right. Okay, well then that's interesting, and so just I'm just interested when someone comes to you as a startup. I know that you're obviously a generous soul, and I'm sure you love to see people succeed. At the end of the day, you're running a business, you've got staff, you need to get paid. So how is it that you choose who to take on and who not to?
Yeah, you make a really good point, and I think I've spent a lot of time in my boardroom over the last 6 or 7 years, with ideas that are going nowhere, but you give people the time of day regardless, because you don't know whether, even if it's not that venture, it might be the next one. So I certainly always try and give people the time of day, and if it takes half an hour or an hour, so be it. It's time well spent. And we'll point them in the right direction, and we can introduce them pretty quickly to their, an R&D tax advisor, an accountant, someone that can help them with their early stage innovation company approval, all of those sort of things that make them a viable startup when they do go to see different angel investors and different PE firms. It doesn't hurt for me to have a bit of a chat, or for one of my team to have a bit of a chat for half an hour.
Yeah, it's interesting, I suppose. It's a little bit like, if the managing partner at Pitcher Partners wants you to have a talk to someone, I guess, you say yes, because this next hour might be a waste of time, but of course that same partner could bring you in, the next unicorn for all you know, the next time they drop by. So there's a bit of that. But it's also, what's interesting about, as I say, I'm more sort of in the distressed turnaround space. We do a bit of M&A and a bit of, startup as well. But it's all about, and something you just mentioned there, it's all about the team, isn't it? In each of these scenarios, it's, the legal teams and the accountants and the other advisors.
I think that's right, and you're right, because we do both startup and we do distressed. We do a lot of distressed work as well, particularly distressed M&A activity. We did a number of distressed deals last year. Probably most notably, we acted on the sale of Matt Blatt's IP to Kogan in May. But I think you're right. The thing with most of these deals is whether someone can, A, back the people involved, and B, how switched on are their advisors, and are their advisors working cohesively together. We've got one awful M&A deal at the moment where it's an Australian business. They've appointed a corporate advisor out of New Zealand who can't travel here. He's appointed his mates who are New Zealand counsel as lead counsel. So right. We've got this dog's breakfast of an information memorandum for an Australian business that's all based out of NZ. So you really do disadvantage the client if the advisor team isn't working cohesively.
Yeah, well, then a different challenge, of course, is if you find out that the weakest link in the advisor team is the one that referred you the matter as well. But that's another challenge.
Yes.
You sort of laugh knowingly there, so I'm sure it's happened to you as well. All right, listen, let's bring Gino back. Now, I think on the weekend, Gino actually had to pull on a jersey. And is this you on the park, Gino, scoring some goals? Let's just have a quick look.
Part of this match is Franjic. Derbyshire, there's the...
How good was that? I mean, that was spectacular.
Well done, Gino.
I do try my best.
I've got to tell you, because I knew Gino, I sort of tune into A-League, but I have watched a couple of those games, and it's world class. It really is. It's fantastic. Gino, I'm wondering, a little bit like Nick, obviously in the position that you're in, you get lots of people wanting your involvement in their startups. How is it? Is there anything mentally, either formally or informally, that you ask yourself before you get involved? Are there any special criteria, or is there a couple of golden rules?
Yeah, look, the first thing for us is, again, where's the lead come from? And, like you said earlier, if it's somebody that gives you a lot of good business, you sit down with them, and at very worst, you make a contact, and like Nick said, they might find the next thing that's a cracker. So, it's all about treating people with respect, and, and it hopefully comes back the same way. For me, every deal we go in with, I know it sounds strange, but, is it the type of person you can sit down and have a beer with if there's an issue and say, listen, we've got to sort this out, or this isn't making sense, is very important to us.
The first thing that you said is actually at the top of my list here, and that's people and management team. Yeah. So Nick, how important is management team when you look at these situations?
Yeah, entirely, Nick. I think our bread and butter is drafting documents and thinking about the worst case scenario. And I'll always sort of say to clients and stakeholders, this document, if it's done correctly, should never come out of the drawer, because if you don't like and enjoy the people you're in business with, then the deal's going nowhere. It's dead in the water. So for me, it's fundamental, and I think if people get along well and they enjoy working together, then that's the key ingredient in any business deal.
Now, I do have there is a lawyer that plays on the Macarthur Bulls. Now, I'm sorry, this is a bit of a lawyer joke, Nick, so you'll have to hear me here. But This is the lawyer just stopping the bad ideas from getting through.
To make the impact, it's in surely. Federici, he kept it out, did he? He did not, did he? It's back off the bar. Can you believe what you just saw?
I mean, that was absolutely sensational. But you need someone on your team that can certainly do that. That guy. Where did you find that guy, Gino? I mean,
so, Ante's known Adam from the Socceroos days. I think they were in camp together. I think Ante was finishing, and these guys were coming through. But like Ante's a good example about a startup where all of those players that have come across from overseas and so forth, either their agents know Ante or the players know Ante. And Mark Milligan's a perfect example. That it makes no sense at all for Mark Milligan to finish his career with a startup in Australia. The most capped Socceroo, but strong relationship with Ante, and came back. But that clip, I'll tell you a funny story about that. So one of the sponsors behind it, entry-level sponsorship, and that clip that weekend was shown over 1 million times.
Can I tell you? I mean, it's worth the entry fee just to see that. That's a few seconds. Again, it's just world class. That is absolutely world class. But I guess it goes, talking about management team. I mean, it makes the point beautifully, doesn't it? I mean, you've just explained it there. Whether it's on the football park or in business, and I guess one of the bullet points here I've got when it comes to management team is motivation. So, I mean, what is it that motivates? What is it that motivates Ante to get involved? In a startup A-League club?
Look, Ante's a very, very competitive person. But again, came back to relationships. So one of our partners who's in the football club is also the CEO here. He and Ante have known each other for, 30 odd years. And, a lot of respect there. I think he gave Ante, one of his first coaching gigs after he finished playing. Same with Mark Rudan at Western United and close relationship with Tony Popovich. They wanted to come back and do something exciting. And, and people got to remember, Ante left the Matildas to come into a startup. And, took a lot of courage, a lot of trust. But for us as well, as a startup, we looked at who could come in and do the job and allow us to do everything off the field and not have to worry about, the football. And Ante's done a phenomenal job managing that football department. And, and it's allowed us to manoeuvre through COVID, knowing that we haven't had the issues off the field. On the field.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Now, Nick, we were talking a little bit earlier. There's one of the consequences, partly of central banks responding to COVID around the world in terms of QE. And also, government support such as an Australia JobKeeper. It means there is a wall of money out there, and so there's certainly a wall of money for M&A deals. And you were saying there's also a lot of money coming in for startups as well.
Yeah, that's right, Nick. I mean, we've seen so much. I think there's sort of the three categories that we see so much of, and you'll be familiar with these. The private debt market in the last few years, and even in 2020, has just gone absolutely through the roof. As banks have sort of tapered away a little, as the big four have tapered a little bit away from the business banking sector, either smaller banks or the private peer-to-peer lending market in Australia has just gone through the roof. Then obviously the capital raising startups are getting funded quite quickly and from a much earlier stage. So typically we used to see Australia as a very conservative startup market compared to the US. And basically in Australia, you wouldn't raise capital until you're almost a scale up by definition. And what we mean by that is you had a bit of revenue, you had some traction, whereas now we're seeing that much earlier at idea stage. And then obviously the third category is, as you mentioned, M&A activity. We've seen a lot of non-distressed M&A, and particularly now that the foreign investment review threshold has been lifted back away from $0.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I know some people that sold a business not so long ago, and I think one of their regrets is that they sold it back then and not now. You know, it's a little bit like that. Yeah, one of the very interesting things that you said a little bit earlier, Gino, was we all think about all the money that's around, but you were saying it's actually created a different problem is deciding who to take the money from. So tell me a little bit about that problem and how you go about solving it.
Yeah, look, we've on the Opus Waste business, we've had a couple of offers from some great investment firms and private equity, I should say, but they just weren't the right fit for what the organisation is trying to achieve, but also how they do things to how we're structured, and I think from our perspective, and I think a lot of startups, you've got to look at not just getting the money, but who your partners are. Are they going to drive the business the same way that you want to drive it? Do they have the same vision? So the money is probably the smallest part of an investment from our perspective, because you can get caught that somebody does want to go globally, or doesn't want to manufacture, they just want to outsource. So you got to look at every bit of the whole investment to make sure it's the right thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I love watching Dragon's Den. I don't know if any of you guys watch Dragon's Den. The UK version is fantastic, and you've got it starts off with in comes the entrepreneur pitching their ideas, and there's the 5 dragons. But occasionally you get someone who comes in with that red hot idea, and then the dragons are pitching to them. Well, you should pick me because I've got some connections with these overseas markets and all of that sort of stuff. So it's interesting, Gino. Maybe in this market the shoe's on the other foot.
No, 100%. And when you're looking at a capital raise, is my advice for a lot of people is what else can they bring to the table besides the money? You might have a business that's got some real smart on the tech side, finance, accounting, legal, but they struggle with marketing. So you've got to look at what is best on that investment, and what do you need outside of cash.
Okay, Nick, any sort of comments on that?
Yeah, I think that those comments are right. You get into kind of a reverse due diligence phase, and where basically you say, well, what can this investor? I've got half a dozen term sheets on the table. What can this investor bring to the table from an operational or a growth perspective beyond the cash? The amount of early stage startups and scale ups I've seen where people have given away, a couple of % sweat equity here and there, to people that have then gone on to do effectively nothing for them. It's absolutely phenomenal. I'm not saying this is the case in this instance, but we've all seen in the media how many option holders have done exceptionally well out of Afterpay. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that they didn't earn their sweat, but it can have some very big dollar signs in front of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. And it's also something, I mean, you've been around for a little while. I mean, this is not a problem that was around, 5 years ago. I mean, when did it all flip? Was it GFC, or was it, more recently with this COVID, or?
In terms of, look, I think it's always, to be honest with you, it's always been there for me in the sense that people get in quite early. There's always some, there's often a couple of opportunistic, angels or advisors circling around. They'll do, what should be a $5,000 fee for service for 3 or 4% in equity. And if that business goes well, then they've got a very handsome paycheck. It is what it is. I mean, a lot of my one of my clients recently just sold to a large European listed firm in the tech space. They'd signed a deal with a corporate advisor where he effectively got 15% of their exit proceeds. Now, any day of the week, 15% is not market. But when you're a 20-year-old founder in a tech business, and this person seems to be your only hope for growth, then they're signing these kind of documents uninformed.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, we'll come to that. I think you sort of segued into my next little heading that I've got in front of me here, which is legal mistakes. But I know that sometimes when we get introduced to a matter, say somebody knows someone who's got a business that they're trying to raise capital, but and we've come to them genuinely through the side door. It might be a relative or some other connection, but they've signed a mandate. They've signed a mandate with someone, and that other, the other mandates, the person who's got the mandate has really done nothing, but they're standing there. I guess they're legally entitled to a slice of the pie.
We see a huge amount of that, and I don't know the answer to how you get, because you made the point at the outset. How do I have someone come and sit in my office and say, look, here's a bill for $5,000 for the privilege? That's just not going to happen. But there needs to be a better way to educate them on some basic sort of tips and traps that they can find themselves in when they're doing those first initial equity deals, because we see them get into trouble time and time again.
And what are some of the legal horror shows, Nick? We'll come, and then I'll ask Gino if he's seen any of those. What are some of the legal disasters that maybe you've come in, the second guy in, and you've seen, whether or not they're co-founder agreements, or what are the sort of things that people make mistakes on?
Co-founder stuff are, usually those people come to a party with relatively equal bargaining power, but the first cracks start to appear with those sweat advisors who promise the world and deliver nothing, and they are holding on to a reasonable percentage of equity that they possibly shouldn't. Then the other thing is probably the first opportunistic cash investor, and the level of control. I mean, we've seen some stuff where the level of control is absolutely, the balance is way too in favour of one party over the other. So much so that we've seen IP rights for all of North America basically given to the investor with no consideration whatsoever. Now, these things aren't transaction, unlike an insolvent transaction, Nick, which you'd be familiar with the distress space. These aren't voidable transactions. These are handshake commercial agreements that are enforceable. Right.
That's interesting, Gino. I mean, what we're talking about here is, I guess maybe first round, maybe that's the private investor. Someone's gone in and they've just taken a huge chunk of the pie, and maybe they're blocking the next round of capital. I mean, I see this, in debt deals. You see people have come in and maybe taken too much security, or they've taken security for their fees and all that sort of stuff. But how I guess on one hand, you're keen to get that first round of capital. How do you balance? You're all hot and heavy. You want that first round of capital, but you don't want to lose the second. You don't want to block the second round. I'll come back to you in a sec, Gino. I'll just go to Nick first.
I think the economy's shifting the balance of power back the other way, Nick, to some extent. So the more cash there is in the economy, the less of that opportunistic behaviour we're sort of seeing, because people are saying, well, we've got options here from a funding perspective, so therefore we'll take an investor that is dealing on more balanced terms. And to overlay that, there's actually a lot more of startup and scale up debt happening than historically. Businesses that weren't getting debt funding because of this private debt market and because of this neo-bank market are getting funded where previously they wouldn't have got funded because they wouldn't have had bricks and mortar. So we're seeing founders of startups and early stage scale-ups saying, well, hang on a minute, is there a debt option here? Because an interest rate sub 5% is probably cheaper than the equity I have to give away if I back myself. So we're seeing a lot more of that.
And Gino, in your experience, you've been involved in a number of startups, obviously, and early stage. Is it something where you say, well, we don't have to give equity away, we're going to give you the royal opportunity of some debt in this thing? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, look, we're looking at a lot of deals. I'm seeing a lot of deals where, we've got convertible notes going in because we're not 100% sure on the transaction. There's something there. So there's a lot of that going on. But going back to your legal issue, sorry, because I cut out. I'm seeing a lot of these startups aren't getting the right advice legally, and it's coming back to bite them. And you're trying to save costs, and unfortunately, startups start to look at cutting costs in the wrong spots. And the two areas that you just can't afford to do it is having the right accounting advice, but also definitely the right legal advice. Especially when it comes to things like shareholders agreements, fund agreements or debt agreements. If it's not done right, like I said, you could be selling a business for a couple $100 million and you've got to give 15% away.
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit like a marriage, isn't it? It's all very well when there's no assets and no business and nothing really much of value, but down the track, who knows? We'll give Nick a free kick, Gino, but I'll ask it to you and then I'll come to Nick. What are some of the criteria to make sure that you've got the right lawyer? Look,
the first thing is, it comes down to how we do business is, do you have a relationship with a person? And if you can trust the person, well, then that's the key thing. But when it comes to legal advice, do they specialise in that? Are you going to just a local lawyer who just does conveyancing and might do one or two corporate deals, or are you going to someone like Nick, who, for example, specialises in M&As and corporate advice? That's the thing you've got to be looking at.
Well, we'll turn the table a little bit on that, Nick. The other thing is, sometimes you might be you've got a client who's come to you first, and they haven't chosen. There's a lot of debt advisory and PE firms and accounting firms that have got M&A departments and capital raising departments. How do you choose the right capital raising partner?
Gino's right. You really need to analyse the size of the business and where they're at, and then find the right sort of corporate advisor for that market, depending on who you have relationships with. I think anyone that's and that's part of the problem with, there's been a lot of marketplaces and platforms that have had a dabble in just trying to create an investor and target technology marketplace where you can basically jump on your phone, find a target company and put 200 grand in and get a tax deduction for it. But really in Australia, and I don't know if that's working overseas, but in Australia, we are really in our infancy in that regard, and we do business on relationship. And I think we still take a lot of comfort from the fact that, somebody knows somebody and that person's a decent operator.
Yeah, interesting. Look, something we haven't talked about business plans and all that sort of stuff. We're going to just take that as a given that you need to have a decent business plan. You certainly need to have your ideas communicated succinctly. Is my view. We get a lot of people approaching us. If you've got a 2-pager that lays it all out, it's a lot better than someone just ringing you up saying, "Look, I'm looking at doing this, and I've got a half-baked that." That certainly doesn't work. But we'll take that as a given. But having said that, how do you, who should do the pitch deck? I'll come to you, Nick, and then I'll ask you, Gino. Who should prepare a pitch deck? Should it be prepared by the company? Should they engage external accounting firms? What's your view?
Look, I think really the marketing piece and the fancy sort of content should be prepared by the founders, or some kind of digital agency if they've got the budget. Usually they don't. But I'm a strong believer in sending them to an accountant as soon as possible to pressure test their numbers, because there's nothing worse than seeing a pitch deck when when they're going through a capital raising process or the first round of due diligence, and somebody comes in and just rips their numbers to shreds because they haven't pressure tested whether the forecasts are even plausible. I think that goes to one of the gripes I do have with startup founders, and often they'll come into my office and I think they need to have done everything they can humanly do to get the business as far advanced as they can. It's not enough just to come in and say, here's my 4-page PDF idea. Do you think I can raise $2 million? You need to, when you're building a business, you basically have to scrape, beg, steal and borrow to get as much of it off the ground as you can before you then take your pitch deck to market.
Yeah, that's interesting. I saw on Twitter someone said it's rude to ask a question that you could have found out yourself on Google, and it's a little bit of the same principle there. Well, what do you think, Gino?
Look, my view with the pitch deck is I only want to read it after they've spent a couple of hours telling us about their business and their dream of it, and the founder knows it back to front. I've had meetings with potential deals where they've brought their accountant and their lawyer along, and and the founders just sat there and not talked about it. And in one case we actually asked their lawyer and accountant to leave the room and said, "Okay, now talk to me about the deal," and we ended up investing. The pitch deck is what I want to summarise after these guys have actually left. The founder's got to be able to talk from the heart, knows back to front, knows the numbers, and then you get into it with the accountant and the solicitor later on at a second stage. And I think a lot of guys, get dragged into let me come along, I'm your accountant and I'll explain it. And, like I said, you got to love it. You've got to have everything invested in motion into it. And if the founder is like that, then, you get excited.
I certainly want to see a bit of passion. The other thing is you certainly want to have workshopped answering all the obvious questions. There's nothing like sitting in front of someone and you're asking them about the size of the opportunity, the different niches in the market, how you're going to get early traction, who are the competition, what do you compare, all those obvious things. And if you can, if you've got the answers just rattling off. Now, look, Kenel Tonkin's just thrown in a question here, and you mentioned pressure tested, Nick, and I'm going to go back and listen to this again. You've given me a whole new glossary here. We've got the reverse due diligence. We've got the pressure testing. What do you mean by that?
I basically mean to go through and say, well, where are our sources of revenue from this potential business? Where do we get our first 10,000 customers from? What's their expected spend? What do we think our fixed costs are going to be at that time, and our variable costs as it scales up? So I think most good accountants can do a cash flow and a profitability and cash burn forecast on that basis. To the second part of the question in terms of revenue optimism, I think that what I see from smart investors and smart money is they'd much rather see revenue realism than fake optimism. So I think your numbers should be, you should paint the blue sky, but the blue sky should be possible and not fanciful. And it raises something in my mind that's probably important that I really like to see at that pitch deck stage or go to market stage, and that is the shopping list. And I kind of take a view that startups and scale-ups shouldn't raise more cash than they actually have to. And that goes to Gino's point that really you should be in bed with who you want to be in bed with and who you want to do business with, and B, you should only take the money you need for your business shopping list. And when I say shopping list, it's kind of taking that cash flow forecast that they've done with their accountant and saying, well, what is our cash burn over the next 12, 18, 24 months, and what are we going to spend the money raised on? And I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, well, that the old sources and uses of funds. Where are you going to get the money from, and what are you exactly going to spend it on? And just on that subject of forecasts, I like to see line items, revenue line items. If it's going to be B2B, who are the customers and who are the customer segments? What are the product market segments as well? We've got a question here from Deanne Tyndale over in WA. How often are you seeing female founders asking for funds, and if not, why not? That's interesting. I mean, I'll just start on that. I saw something very interesting because it's been International Women's Day, etc. Recently. And I saw someone saying there was a bit of a meme with "I am a female founder" with the word "female" crossed out. But I must admit, certainly in my line of work, there's obviously a lot more. We see a lot more men in business. I mean, why is it? What do you see, Nick? And if you're not seeing a sort of a lot more women, why do you think that is?
I love doing business with female business owners, whether they're founders or whether they're operating established businesses. I think as guys, we often shoot from the hip, and we speak without thinking. Whereas often when I observe female business owners, they take the stimulus, they pause, and then they react. And I think that often creates a much more logical business owner. I've seen some really smart females that have both raised cap and gone through to really successful exit. I certainly don't think there's any prejudice. In fact, I think even though a lot of the investors and a lot of the private family office managers, the private equity guys and the angel investors, even though for some reason they are male, and I'm not sure of the reason, but I certainly don't see any prejudice in people in either A, female founders asking for money, or B, getting it.
What do you think, Gino?
Yeah, look, I'd actually say, 3-4 years ago, it'd be 20-30%. We're getting pitches now. I'd say close to 40-50, growing. And our group CEO, I'm not sure if you've ever come across Camilla Galasso from ANZ. She's
I haven't. No.
On the 12th. She has a real belief there's some great deals there, and I'm seeing more and more of it. So I know the media, and social media is talking, highlighting a lot of the facts that the opportunities aren't there, but we're seeing a lot more deals coming from females.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the risk of stereotyping, I'll say that when I do get deals, they are better prepared, and I'm sorry, it's just that's just the way they are. And I wonder if because they are better prepared, they also may be more cautious. So maybe you see less because certainly the ones that we encounter are, when we see females, they're more cautious. Maybe they're less likely to take on undue risk. I don't know. I'd love to see some. I'm sure there's been studies done on that. I'm sure if we went to Google Scholar, we might find something. Listen, guys, we've actually hit the 44-minute mark. So I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to ask you both for your final comments when it comes to startups. I'll start with you, Nick.
I think my final comments are: get your advisor panel sorted early. So a good accountant, good lawyer, good either debt or source of capital advisor. Understand your shopping list. What do you want to spend the money on? And then be as prepared as humanly possible. Because if you're not prepared to sweat, some 12, 14-hour days in the pitch deck phase, then unfortunately, my view is you won't make it.
Okay, thank you, Gino.
Everything that Nick said, plus one more thing: passion.
Yep.
You've got to get in the door, and you've got to believe in what you're trying to sell. Doesn't matter what type of widget it is. You've got to believe it, and you got to breathe it, and that is the biggest thing. And I keep on coming back down to hard work. If you're only doing 8 hours, and the next person's doing 16 hours, well, they're throwing out double the amount of work you are. And you've got to have the passion and the belief in what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, there's no substitute for those hours. There's no doubt about that. Who are you playing this week, Gino?
Wellington in Wollongong.
Wellington and Wollongong. Okay, no worries. Oh, I look forward to getting out to a home game, that's for sure. Listen, I'm going to say a big thank you to Nick Hitchens from Hitch Advisory and Gino Marra from Macarthur FC. And thank you very much to our viewers, and thank you to those of you who asked your questions. Thanks, Callum and Deanne. And thank you, everybody. We look forward to doing it again soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.